All right, so I'm going to be honest here. I do not have much of a history with the website Absolute Punk, so it's going to be a little bit weird for me to talk about it, right? But not necessarily. I was tangentially aware of Absolute Punk as a website, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that site. So, welcome back to Critical Weight Theory. And yes, I'm rewinding to the early 2000s internet, before Spotify had Discover Weekly, before TikTok made overnight stars, back when music discovery lived on message boards, CD samplers from magazines, and tight knit online communities. And one of those online communities was AbsolutePunk.net. Founded in 2000 by Jason Tate, Absolute Punk started as a personal project, just a guy sharing music opinions and recommendations. But soon it grew into something bigger, what seemed like an unsinkable ship for punk, emo, indie, and alternative music fans. And Absolute Punk wasn't just about posting news, it was a full on hub for music culture. Well, at least the subgenres that were featured on the website. Of course, they probably didn't discuss a lot of like classical music or jazz, but it was a niche. It was a specific place that you could go to talk about these specific kinds of artists. And it did have news and reviews, daily updates on album releases, tours, and trends, plus in depth interviews that carried serious weight in the scene. It was also a good source for band discovery. It was a place you found your new favorite band before anyone else. Well, if you liked the types of music, of course. A lot of groups, from Paramore and the Wonder Years to All Time Low, got early exposure right there at Absolute Punk. And these are bands you might still hear about today. People still talk about Paramore, and I still occasionally hear about All Time Low. I can't say that I personally have listened to them a lot, but they're not unknown bands. And websites like this, they were a part of that exposure, which helped create these people that were still talked about today. And there were forums and a sense of community. It was like the lifeblood of the site, threads on everything, favorite bands, pop culture, life advice. It wasn't just talk, it was a sense of belonging. People didn't just post, they spent time there. I don't know if I would say they lived there necessarily, but they spent a fair amount of their time on these sites. And even though yes, we might frown upon that or make fun of it, but like it's not so bad to have some place that you could go to, even if it's some place online, and you get a sense of community and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not as quick to dismiss that as some people are. Sure, you should still sometimes step outside, turn off the device, and spend time out in the real world. Maybe even go out into the woods and stuff like that. But there's still nothing particularly wrong about spending a little bit of time online at a place like what we're talking about here. And I kind of had my own place like that. I used to upload music to Acid Planet, and I would listen to other artists' music there. I would collaborate with people. Some people even made music videos out of my songs. It seems weird today, but that was actually happening, and I actually had fans, and I became fans of other people's work. But Acid Planet kind of fell apart. That's the sad fact. So it ends up seeming almost more like a hollow experience. But isn't that life? That also happens in the real world sometimes too. People that you grew up with, who were your childhood pals, well, you might go decades and decades without talking to them anymore. And that's similar to what can happen online. It's a bit of a bummer, but what can you do? But anyway, Absolute Punk, they did have interviews and exclusives, regularly featured conversations with artists, and gives fans a peek into their creative world. But you also had editorials. Jason Tate and contributors added a reflective, opinionated voice that shaped the site's personality. So the place did have a legacy, and it's still around in a certain forum. I'm going to tell you about that a little bit later. But Absolute Punk became more than a website for people. It was the internet's barometer for this slice of music culture. Labels, publicists, and bands paid attention because the community mattered. And, you could have a little bit of success by being involved in a site like this. For fans, it was about discovery, friendship, and a sense that your voice was part of something bigger. And some people look back at these forums the way others remember their hometown record shop, a place that shaped their taste, their friendships, even their careers. And I first heard of bands from music stores and that sort of thing, of course, in a lot of occasions. I remember my first CDs and tapes that I got from Sam Goody and places like that. I I remember there's a I don't remember the name of the store, but in Denver when I was there on a like a student summer youth program thing, I bought a tape of Dead Kennedy's "Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death," and you know, it's a it's a weird fact that sometimes we get our musical tastes shaped by these random findings and events. Like I also remember I bought I bought my first Depeche Mode tape from a truck stop of all places, and I realized that I'm gonna occasionally take a chance and do things like buy a random cassette tape from a band that I never gave a chance before, and it was interesting, and it's similar to what could happen on these forums. That's really interesting aspect of meeting people and doing things, which doesn't happen as often as it should sometimes, in a positive way. And I think there are a lot of people out there who probably have had really good experiences on websites like these. And, Hans Christian Andersen once wrote, "Where words fail, music speaks." And Absolute Punk, it allowed people to speak about music, and hopefully that wouldn't be a failure. You know what I mean? It was a success for a lot of people. They saw the validity of the site, and it helped the site grow. And the reviews, editorials, and all of that turned into a chorus of voices that helped define an era. And I didn't use the word chorus there for, the most relevant reason. In reality, Absolute Punk rebranded as Chorus.fm. They transitioned in 2016. Jason Tate steered the community into a new phase. Same heart, but more of a. It seems like they have more of a broader focus, and it's actually maybe less streamlined in a way. It's for some people the end of an era, and it could have been maybe necessary for survival. Maybe Absolute Punk was starting to fade, and the label of Chorus.fm might have had some sort of broader appeal. I don't know. But now they seem to talk a little bit more about pop artists in addition to, like sometimes having some focus on punk rock or pop punk or whatever. But I've just went over there and I saw articles about Lady Gaga and stuff like that. So it's kept the community alive and evolving, but it seems like it's not really evolving in a unique way. It seems a little bit more like just a Reddit forum that you know Jason Tate is involved in. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it does still have the same character that Absolute Punk did. But I do know that Chorus.fm, it sounds a little more, I don't know, it just sounds more corporate to me. The very name of it. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. But anyway, Absolute Punk is remembered as a nostalgic landmark, sort of a legacy of the internet age. Its influence lives on in the artists that it championed, the fans that it connected, and the countless people who can still say, I found my favorite band on AbsolutePunk.net. Well, that's about it. Thanks for listening. If you like the episode, share it with someone, maybe somebody who spent their teenage years in a music forum or flipping through those CD samplers in the back of magazines. Because at the end of the day, scenes change, but the spirit of discovery never dies.